Lonely Light lingers at the edge of the world, the lord of its halls, more than a little happy to entertain Darian and his host. The Dornish knight has already taught his own knights more in the last few weeks than his own marshal has over the past year. Darian had taken to wearing the new armor, gifted to him by the Night's Watch, more frequently, getting used to the weight of the plate. He was a nimble fighter and wasn't one to be slowed down. It would take some getting used to, and yet another opportunity to do so had presented itself here on Lonely Light. Lord Quellen sought more of Darian's knowledge. It wouldn't take them long, but there were more knights to train. This first lot, unfortunately, weren't as bright as the last. With one failing their test, Darian hoped to succeed with the last, and thankfully, he did, with 135 gold gained. Before they travelled any further, the gold gain thus far would be spent on improving the band's main pavilion. The task itself, however, would take 9 months to complete. There were parts of the Iron Isles that Darian wished to sail to. However, smallpox spreading throughout the Isles proved too dangerous. They would instead avoid the Keep of Corpses, choosing instead to explore the eastern part of the Isles before ending up in Pyke. The seas were calm and surprisingly kind, considering the reputation the Iron Isles held. They visited Bleachbone and the Drum Tower, traversing the narrow inlet to Herringby, and then on towards Hoare Castle, an ancient seat from which the Iron Isles were once ruled. Yet it was Pyke that drew the interest of young Darian. Before continuing their journey to Pyke, Darian had received a raven. His acquaintance, Sir Jonal, had become all the rage across the courts as of late. He'd written a piece that dealt with memory and what we leave behind. Jonal had publicly dedicated it to Darian, time of memoriam. The mightiest men must leave this earth, their deeds, their acts, their swollen worth. And when their final hour nears, hope shall they, their name bring cheers. So far, Darian had kept his thoughts to himself, but the buzz had grown too dramatic for him to ignore. He could see, though, that the poem was heartfelt. There was to be a short stop in Grey Grave before the band would sail further south to Ironholt and Pyke. Yet it is easy to get lost. The cliffs near Cod Hall all looked the same. The band, unfortunately, would be delayed. Only costing them 11 days, they soon found themselves back on sea and then the rough, sharp cliffs that led down towards Pyke. All this travel had helped Darian better manage the members of his guard, those closest to him. He would now be able to manage even more. The cost to fully supply the band was just out of Darian's reach, and while that was disappointing, an opportunity of another kind had reached Darian's ears. Lord Paramount Bormund Baratheon of the Stormlands had announced a grand tournament. It would be a risk like no other, yet could Darian deny the chance to win once again back here in Westeros? The tourney was to take place in Storm's End. It was quite the journey to make, yet leaving his army and the bulk of his forces in the Iron Isles would allow Darian to travel far faster. The plotted route that Arella set for the band would lead them along the western coast and then through the Westerlands, narrowly avoiding the plague of smallpox tearing through the Riverlands. And if all goes well with their travels, from Storm's End, they would sail along the eastern coast of Westeros before cutting back in just above King's Landing. The journey alone was set to take them 6 months, excluding the tournament. Yet sightseeing was not a priority on the journey there. Speed would be needed above all else. Yet there was always time for a little hunt. While in Matchford, Darian saw an opportunity to test his mettle against Hardbine. They would not have time for a proper outing. Yet, as Darian traversed the area, he spotted a pristine wild rabbit at the edge of the forest. It had peculiar markings on its fur, and so he motioned to Hardbine to survey the animal. As he spotted the rabbit, he grinned. "What would you say to a friendly wager, leader? Whoever strikes that pristine fellow with an arrow wins." To Darian, it sounded like a deal and an easy task for him to perform. Darian's arrow struck true. The rabbit in sight, he pulled his string, releasing, and the arrow went straight through the animal's body. "Nice shot." Hardbine cheered as Darian took the trophy to hand. They were already making good progress, traveling close to Casterly Rock and Lannisport, where it seemed the Lord Paramount was dealing with some local troubles. It meant little to Darian. Remaining undetected meant staying out of trouble, keeping a low profile, at least until they reached the tawny grounds. Eastward, they wandered until they found themselves in the realm of the Reach. It was there Darian found himself settled, laughing and telling stories, drinking with Sarah, Cyrene, and Ygritte. Darian didn't know she had it in her, but Sarah ended up telling a particularly ribald story about 4 peasants she had seen in Pyke. After drying his eyes from the laughter and drinking a bit to clear his throat, Darian sought to tell a story of his own, albeit with a few extra embellishments, where he failed to impress. They had been traveling for some time when Darian happened upon a cave in the wilderness. Curious, he took a few steps in and saw nothing but darkness. He motioned for one of his guards to bring a torch, and once he had light from the torch fire to see further, he realized the cave must be very deep. A couple of bats were hanging about, observing him warily as he considered what to do. It would not take long, and so Darian delved deeper. The cave had little to interest the knight, however, and so he traveled onwards, the sight of King's Landing in the distance growing nearer by the day. They passed by the gauntlet, where Darian first won the heart of Sarah, his snapdragon, who was with child once again. Darian spoke to her plainly. He was not a possessive man, yet he wished to know if this child was truly his. Yet before Darian could get an answer, wild animals attacked their camp. Nobody was hurt, but they did ransack some of their food supplies. Buying extra supplies from locals would allow them to continue at the pace that they had been traveling yet. And as they continued through Pottingfield, Abbo suddenly perked up. Before Darian could ask what he was thinking of, he asked everybody if they remembered the folk song about the beauty of Pottingfield. "It's the one we heard the locals singing in the tavern the other day," Abbo reminded them. As soon as he started singing the lyrics, everyone started to recall the song, and they all joined in with varying amounts of lyrical ability. With everyone's hearts heartened by the cheerful tune, the journey seemed less dreary all of a sudden. Darian joined in with the singing as they carried on their way. They were close now. It had been nearly a month since the band set out from Pyke. Darian had seen highs and lows. He had reveled in the wind blowing through his hair and lamented the rocks in his boots. There were so many places, so many things he was yet to see. Out here on the open road, he could feel free, the confinement of his camp position, if only for a little while. The roads are full of pilgrims and wanderers. Perhaps it was among them that Darian would find peace of mind. Out here, he was truly free, a traveler like many others. Finally, Darian received an answer from Sarah. The child was his. She spoke with a knowing smile. They were close to their destination now, yet there had been some delays on the road. There was a chance they may miss the tourney yet. Currently, Darian was taking in the impressive defensive structure at the peak of Standwatch. It was quite something. As he wandered along the outer perimeter, he noticed a particular person in the distance. She appeared to be mumbling to herself, all the while stopping to crouch and collect what appeared to be herbs of various kinds. It was almost as if she was talking to the herbs. Darian approached her carefully, and she looked up. Various herbs displayed in her palm. He noticed a spark of curiosity behind her eyes, proposing an unspoken question. Ariane was her name, and she certainly knew her way around the various plants of the region. She had the potential of an excellent physician, perhaps even better than his current maester. Darian would pay for her expenses. A fateful meeting, he thought. And so it was. They finally drew near to Storm's End, trumpets sounding in the distance. It was clear to Darian that the fates had not ordained him to take part in this tourney, or so it seemed, as they found themselves lost near Sheafbrook, so close, yet so far away. Ariella approached Darian with a grim look on her face. "I'm sad to report that we didn't make it in time, my captain. The activity started today, and we are simply not there for it." Yet there was still much that they would be able to see on their returning journey, much that they could learn. "What are you doing?" Darian asked Ronnet. He had found it hard to fall asleep tonight, perhaps because the traveling had disturbed his body's normal routine, so he stepped out towards the campfire. Ronnet was awake as well, despite not having night watch duty at that moment. And so Darian sat down beside him. With a contemplative look on his face, Ronnet pointed at the night sky and smiled. "The stars. Sometimes I just like to stare at them. Magnificent, aren't they? I thank the stranger I can witness such wonders every day. I'm sure you recognize some of the constellations. Was that the constellation? The Garter of the Crone?" Darian studied the constellations alongside Ronnet that eve. It was a break that was sorely needed. Perhaps the gods had intervened to slow their travel. The tourney cursed. Yet it did not make the sting of missing it any easier. They passed through Duskendale and the Hall of the White Swords. Through forests and fields they wandered. They even wandered through the scorched, shattered, broken remains of Harrenhal. Once the seat of House Hoare, the ancestors of those who now reside on the Iron Isle. The stories of Harrenhal did not do it justice, Darian believed. No occupant had dared to take on the challenge of rebuilding the once grand castle. Instead, it lay in ruin. It was far bigger than any castle he had ever set his foot in. Even the Red Keep can't compare. The once great towers had been cracked and bent by dragonfire long before his arrival. Harren the Black had faith in these walls, and his line ended with him. The castle served as a reminder that the dragon should not be challenged. Bad luck seemed to follow the band. Owen, a warrior who joined Darian's band beyond the wall, had his horse drop dead. Thankfully, there was a town not too far away where Darian could purchase him a new steed. It would be costly, yet Darian would treat his people well. Whilst moving through the military camps of Switch Hill, Darian saw an opportunity to spar a little, training with the local militias, and in so doing, increased his own skill. Passing through the Twins, it would not be long until the band reached the coast once again. There, at Seaguard, they set sail, onwards towards the Iron Isles. Finally, arriving back in Pyke, Darian found himself surrounded by his full family once again. Reunited, they would revel once again. And then, Ygritte gesticulated wildly as she weaved a story that had now been quite a long time in the making. "He tumbled like a sack of bricks. Hit him right in the head, I did." Ygritte soaked in the acclaim of the gathering with a satisfied smile. It was quite a tale of daring do indeed. The assorted companies still seemed quite agog, trying to cajole another story from Ygritte's lips. Yet Darian had tales of his own, and it seemed that Darian had been learning more than a little from his mother and father. First, the Valyrian tongue from Sarah, then how to wield his sword with a grip not too tight from Darian himself. Arianne's sly smile over the rim of her cup bodes poorly, Darian suspected. Come on then, Darian, let's see if your mind is still as sharp after all these days on the road. She gestured the cup with a flourish. A riddle, perhaps. Without waiting for Darian to acquiesce, she began. I'm easy to get into, but I'm hard to get out of. What am I? Darian was sure he knew the answer, yet guessed wrong. All the same, the revelry had come to a conclusion. Provisions were gained, and experience too. Yet not enough to see them away from the Iron Isles. However, there were contracts aplenty. Lord Gunir of Pebbleton was in need of aid. It was to be a short trip to Pebbleton, and it went by without trouble. Darian sought speed over success chance, a risk for certain, yet it meant they could work faster here. When Darian entered Sarah's tent, after what had been a difficult labor, he saw yet another son in her arms, his fourth now, Blaze, dry land. Darian's gamble had paid off. With 40 gold and 500 provisions, they were closer to leaving the Isles behind. Blood and spit. Apparently, Phryne, child of one of the local lords, had spat in Darian's food during a dinner a few nights ago. You're a changeling, Darian screamed. But you're troll spawn, Phryne screamed back. Darian had been fighting with Phryne every day since. Not a minute went by without him plotting some kind of petty revenge. It seemed the young lad was already starting to take after his father. With the added provisions, the band had just enough to afford all they would need to carry on their way. It would take a large bulk of their provisions to make it to Lannisport. They could travel by sea the whole way, yet there was still much to learn and see when it came to the settlements along the western coast. They crossed the Gulf towards Banefort and Highview, with Darian's army of wildmen and northerners following close behind. Darian too had been honing his skills with his love, Sarah, more proficient than ever. While their travel was slow, it was uneventful for the most part. A fact welcome to the young knight and those that traveled with him. Dreamfire and Sarah flew ahead, keeping a watchful eye on the skies beyond. No doubt, word of their movements would reach the Iron Throne before long. Cautions would still be taken, yet not caution enough. The ambush was expertly sprung. A vulnerable bottleneck in the terrain let a horde of slavers, shackles and swords in hand, team at Darian and the band from two sides, whilst a third group delayed the convoy's main body from assisting them. A chorus of screams breaks out from those in Darian's following, lacking weapons as realization kicks in. If these monsters win out, a horrifying fate awaited many of them. Yet Darian would not allow it. He looked the leader in the eye and challenged the man to a duel to the death. Carson was his name. Clad in armor, with a sudden twitch, the bout began. Feinting left with his spear and stabbing right with an offhand dagger. Carson parries though, shifting into a defensive stance, forming a damn near impenetrable wall of perfect parries between him and Darian. Yet his defenses are hard to break. Still, Darian sends him reeling. Victory was close. Strike, parry, riposte. The man's death sent a ripple of panicked confusion through the enemy's ranks. The battle around Darian inflected. A chorus of screams and wet gurgles went up from the foe as the slave traders were put to the sword by the dozens, dying in their droves. Within minutes, a relief force from the column's main body broke through the slaver rear guard, and it was all over. With a contemptuous kick, Darian knocked what remained of their leader face down into the dirt. Casterly rock and Lannisport were a sight to behold. Strong walls and a keep high upon the stone. Here, they would have to earn their travel further south. Even here, Darien was something of a local hero, the dry land name, spoken by many of the small folk. Little of the contracts available took Darien's interest, yet Lord Walder, Lord of the Crag, was offering a handsome reward for swift, clean work. And so Darien set forth with a much smaller number, quickly encountering muddy roads. Their travel would be delayed. Yet that was likely to be the only trouble that they encountered on their journey. Passing through Castamere, the crag was in sight. Yet there, in the middle of a logging camp, Darien happened upon a massive block that had seen much use. It looked as though it had always been there, even before man walked the earth. Darien's shoulders were tense, and his forearms trembled slightly from the built-up stress as he approached the magnificent wooden trunk. He carefully placed a piece of discarded timber at the podium, and then in one swift motion, raised his axe. With a great swing, the axe met its mark. And then came the crag and Lord Walder. They would get on with their task, not risking failure. Progress would still be swift though. Yet while the band performed their duties, Darien found himself ill. Shivers and weakness. Darien ordered Wyman do no more than what was necessary. Wyman entered his tent with an earthenware jar cradled in his arms and came to sit by Darien's bed. He pulled a leech from the jar and gave it a most tender look before carefully placing it on his face. "Remain still, my lord. Better not disturb their feeding." The leeches did nothing to improve Darien's state. In truth, he felt worse. Yet Wyman tried all the same. He ordered the man away. Darien's health not as bad as it could be. But then came Darien the Younger. On the physician's table, he laid, his form rigid with scared anticipation. It was time to decide now how to treat Darien's leprosy. There were several potential treatments available, ranging from the typical to the unorthodox. It was up to Darien the Elder to decide which best fit the Younger's particular needs. He could see the pain his son was in. While his trust in Wyman had been shaken, Darien still knew the man was capable of much. Time had come for more drastic measures, and the treatment was successful. Not only that, but Sarah was with child yet again, and in what was becoming a regular occurrence, Darien would query her, but not before collecting the coin he was owed. The provisions, too. Lord Walder was happy with his performance, and Sarah confirmed that the child indeed was Darien's and no other. It was the dead of night, near their camp in Blue Depths, when Darien stepped out quietly, hearing a sound. That was when he saw it. His friend, John Quill, quietly approaching Darien's acquaintance, Ygritte, who was sleeping under a tree. Using a rope, John Quill swiftly strangled Ygritte, leaving her hanging from the tree branch. Quickly scanning the area, she made sure she was unseen. It was her second murder, witnessed by Darien. Yet he trusted John Quill. The two had grown up together on the road. She had kept him safe, fought alongside him. John Quill surely had her reasoning, and that dark part of Darien took note. Darien hoped to put it all behind them. Now back within the walls of Lannisport, they were closer to their goal, yet they would still need more, and that might be able to come in other forms. Darien had learnt much on the road, and one of those things was using hooks, favors owed to receive gold in turn, and Darien had one of those favors he could earn gold from right now. Sir Red Roy Connington, a good friend of Sarah's, had been involved in suspicious activity. Darien would keep his mouth closed, for a payment of 55 gold, however. Yet still not enough for those provisions. 40 more gold, at the very least, would be needed. An opportunity like no other presented itself. Lord Tian of Casterly Rock, Lord Paramount of the Westerlands, sought secrets found and was offering a handsome reward. Travel to the rock was swift and straightforward, the band arriving late in the afternoon. "You look confounded, adventurer," came a whisper from the shadows. "Are you really suited for this task? What we need is someone vigilant, cautious, subtle." Darian frantically looked about. The voice appeared to come from a different direction with each word. "You seem to be none of those," said the voice, as Lord Lyle appeared behind him. Yet Darian would not be frightened. He would start planning immediately, with none other than Sarah leading the charge. If Lyle had secrets, they would be found. Whilst working in the court of Lord Lyle, Darian had failed to find any secrets that his Chancellor, Sir Ansel, might possess. However, the truth does not have to stop them. It would be simple to make sure that Ansel suddenly did have secrets he would not want to get out. And an opportunity, like no other, presented itself. No doubt, these secrets would make their way back to the Great Conciliator. Yet Darian could take advantage of this hook too, albeit for a little upfront gold. Darian returned with the secrets he had earned, and gladly took the gold owed. And with that one action, 2 hooks could earn him even more. The first from Lord Lyle, and the second from Lord Tyon himself, who did not yet have the gold to pay, but still had more than enough. Supplies were purchased. With that, they could now travel ever closer to Dorne, their next destination being Oldtown. As they set to leave Lannisport behind, Darian was unsurprised to find that his son, Jaime, was already in his quarters. Next to him, on Darian's bed, a stack of folded clothing, all organized just how Darian liked it. The young lad was efficient and clearly good at earning his father's affection. To the wild surprise of Darian, there too, in Lannisport, he found Magnar Tormund. How the man came to be this far south, and so close, right on the tail of the band. There was only one way that this was going to end. Tormund challenged Darian to a duel. And ill as he was, Darian would face him with sword in hand. From the start of his duel with Tormund, it was clear that Darian had the upper hand. He pressed the advantage, keeping him off balance. And as soon as he made a mistake, leaving Darian an opening, he seized it, piercing deep into Tormund's arm, ending the match. A swift and decisive victory. Yet Darian still would not slay him here. He had proven himself the better and hoped the then would be sent scurrying back. And with that, they finally left the port behind. Yet they would still make some stops along the way. Firstly, in Crackhall for a brief visit, before winding around the coast toward Oakenshield. They sailed through narrow passages, yet the task was easy now. Many of the band were experienced sailors after spending so many years at sea. Even from this distance, the great lighthouse of Oldtown could be seen burning bright in the distance, home to the high towers. The band would not remain here for long. Yet as they drew near, a derelict ship came into sight. A wreckage such as this would not be left to the sea alone, no, not with Darian close by. Yet, as everyone had assumed, there were no survivors to the wreck. However, the clothes and goods left on the corpses would indicate that it was once a wealthy trading ship. Among the wreckage, Darian spied exotic goods and luxurious clothing still intact, save for being a little wet. No doubt, the items would fetch a good price upon reaching the shore. It was a good find. And with that, they had arrived, safe and sound. Here, Darian decided to call upon Sir Ansel, demanding payment for secrets kept, for a profit of 5 gold, no less. For just under half their remaining gold, Darian had their supplies restocked. Their route was plotted, their path planned. To Dorne, they sailed, but not before visiting the various points of interest throughout the great city of Oldtown, the Starry Sept, the Grand Citadel. And upon arriving at the Citadel, Darian was directed by an archmaester to a collection of books. They looked ancient, but were clearly well looked after. Seeking to find a comfortable chair somewhere, Darian sat down with the rather thick book. It went into rather intrinsic detail about the various known hatchings of eggs, starting from the Targaryens' immigration to Dragonstone, from old Valyria all those years ago. Darian would learn what he could while he was here. Finally leaving Oldtown behind, they set sail out past Whisper Point toward Vinetown. And finally, Darian was starting to feel like himself once again. As he awoke that morning and observed the first rays of sunshine, it took him a moment to realize that he had slept soundly for the first time in weeks. He did not wake up coughing once. It had been a long road back to health, but he finally found himself in its warm embrace once more. Spending that time learning back in Oldtown led to Darian learning how better to utilize the various fighting troops from all across the 7 kingdoms, perhaps even beyond. Troops beyond his own culture and custom could now serve more effectively under his command. Vinetown was warm and welcoming, and the fields of Peachtree splendid. As night fell that evening, Darian quickly found himself dreaming. In that dream, he saw a great light, an impenetrable, heavenly light. He did not know what it was or even what it represented, but something about it brought him peace and happiness. Was it a sign from beyond? Or perhaps it was a vision of home, of the great sun that blazes above Dorne. They were nearer now, nearer than they had been in years. The coast of his homeland beckoned. Towards Starfall they sailed, the seat of the ancient House Dane. Here they would rest and recover before venturing to Sunspear. Darian Dryland was home once again. And while he, Sarah, and their children were no doubt far from safe, here at least they would be more welcome. Yet a dragon above Dorne does not go unnoticed, especially by the Dornish. How the princes of these sands react to this new change will be known in the days and weeks to come. But for now, a Dornishman is home. Here, Darian shall seek to earn the favor of his homeland. Here, he will do all he can to keep them unbent, unbowed, and unbroken. And if it is a dragon that shall help them do it, so be it. Dorne shall remain free, so long as the Drylands still draw breath. The great odyssey of Darian Dryland has led him back home, and just who benefits from that the most, as of yet, remains unknown.